The invasion began with fire and arrogance. From the dark silence of space, the Galactic Dominion's warships emerged, their hulls black against the backdrop of Earth's blue, swirling atmosphere. They did not come in secret. They did not need to. No species before had required subtlety. No species before had survived. Fleet Commander Zelvar watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Supremacy, his four-clawed hands clasped behind his back. The conquest of Earth was a mere formality. His strategists estimated the war would last a day, two at most. A planet this primitive, this fractured, could not stand against the might of the Dominion. With a flick of his wrist, he gave the command. Orbital bombardment commenced. Columns of searing plasma rained down from the sky, reducing entire cities to molten ruin. From New York to Beijing, from Moscow to Johannesburg, Earth's greatest centers of power crumbled beneath the Dominion's assault. Great plumes of smoke coiled into the heavens, carrying the scent of annihilation. The humans had barely begun to respond. Their military forces scrambled like insects caught in a storm. Their air forces swatted from the sky before they could mount any meaningful resistance. Zelvar watched impassively. Another war, another conquest, another step toward the Dominion's inevitable rule over the galaxy. Then, something happened. It started with the transmissions, hacked, intercepted, impossible to block. Messages flooded Dominion communications, overriding their systems in a language Zelvar did not yet understand. The humans were speaking. No, not pleading, not surrendering, threatening. A single voice echoed across every Dominion channel, calm and deliberate. Cease your attack. This is your first and final warning. Zelvar sneered. Warnings. A species on its knees did not issue ultimatums. He ordered his fleet forward, deploying his ground troops to secure the major cities that remained. That was when the war changed. Invasion forces landed in what was left of Washington, D.C., expecting to march unchallenged through the wreckage. Instead, they encountered something no Dominion species had ever faced before, an enemy that refused to break. The humans had already begun their counteroffensive. Tanks emerged from underground bunkers, their cannons obliterating Dominion drop ships before they could unload their troops. High-powered railguns, previously classified under humanity's most destructive black projects, speared through Dominion armor with ease. Soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, fought like creatures possessed, using hit-and-run tactics that turned city streets into death traps. Dominion commanders could not understand it. They had seen the history of weaker species. When crushed, they surrendered. When overwhelmed, they bowed. But humans did neither. Zelvar watched in growing frustration as entire battalions were wiped out, not by superior firepower, but by sheer human ferocity. They fought with the desperation of a species that had spent its entire existence at war. Within hours, reports streamed in. Dominion soldiers were deserting, their minds rattled by what they had seen. Some spoke of human ambushes that slaughtered entire squads in the dead of night. Others described weapons that turned their own bioenhancements against them, corrupting their nervous systems, shutting down their ability to think, to fight, to breathe. Even more disturbing, captured Dominion soldiers were being sent back, *** alive, but broken, ***. They spoke of Earth's history, of atrocities committed not against alien invaders, but against their own kind. They whispered of wars fought over land, over pride, over beliefs. They told of weapons the humans had built, not for defense, but for extermination. Nuclear firestorms that had reduced entire cities to ash. Bioweapons designed to unmake an enemy at the genetic level. Tortures perfected not for survival, but for the sheer efficiency of breaking a foe's mind. Zelvar dismissed these reports as fearmongering. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of species. No race could be as monstrous as these claims suggested. Then the second message came. The same voice, the same calm tone, but now edged with something more. Stop attacking, or we stop pretending to be civilized. The words hung in the air like the promise of a storm. Zelvar felt something strange and foreign settle into the pit of his stomach. A sensation he had never encountered in all his campaigns. Doubt. He ordered the fleet to press forward, to crush these defiant creatures once and for all. But the resistance only grew stronger. Humanity's counterstrikes became more calculated, more devastating. Their intelligence networks infiltrated Dominion command structures with alarming ease. Human operatives, mere organics, were hacking Dominion systems, bypassing security protocols that should have been unbreakable. Then, the impossible happened. One of the Dominion's dreadnoughts, an orbital fortress capable of leveling continents, was destroyed, not by a fleet, not by some superweapon, but by a single strike team of human soldiers. They had infiltrated the ship, sabotaged its core, and left a message behind, carved into the command bridge's shattered walls. This is restraint. Zelvar stared at the footage, his mind racing. He had seen species resist before. He had seen enemies fight bravely. But this was different. This was control. The humans weren't fighting at their full potential. They were holding back. The realization struck like a physical blow. He saw now what his analysts had failed to understand. Humanity wasn't desperate. It wasn't cornered. It was waiting. The final message arrived not long after. A broadcast sent across the Dominion's entire communication network. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. His uniform pristine, despite the war raging around him. His eyes were calm, but behind them, something old and terrifying lurked. I am General Adrian Carter of the Unified Earth Command. You have miscalculated. We are not the prey you believed us to be. We have given you 2 warnings. There will not be a third. Zelvar felt his throat tighten. For the first time, the commander of the Galactic Dominion understood the meaning of a word his people had long since forgotten. Terror. The council chamber of the Galactic Dominion was a vast, towering structure, carved from the fused remains of 1,000 conquered worlds. It had stood for millennia as a symbol of dominion, its walls etched with the names of civilizations long extinguished. Now, for the first time in history, those walls bore witness to something unprecedented. Fear. Fleet Commander Zelvar stood rigid before the assembled High Lords, his once proud posture betrayed by the twitch of his secondary hands. His mind raced as he replayed the words from the human general, the warning that had shattered the illusion of an easy conquest. Across from him, Grand Imperator Vorsk leaned forward, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking against the stone table. His voice, usually a smooth hum of authority, was edged with unease. You mean to tell us, Vorsk said slowly, mandibles tightening, that a fledgling species, a world of warring primitives, has forced the great Dominion into retreat? Zelvar hesitated. Not retreat. Not yet. But the reports from the front were undeniable. The humans had dismantled the invasion with terrifying efficiency, not through superior numbers or technology, but through something worse. Methodical cruelty. They are unlike any species we have encountered, Zelvar admitted, his voice measured. They do not fight to defend. They fight to punish. Across the chamber, murmurs spread like ripples in still water. The Dominion had conquered empires, crushed dissent, absorbed countless species into its fold. But never, had an enemy delivered a warning. Warnings implied confidence. Warnings implied restraint. And restraint from a species that had already demonstrated the ability to annihilate entire battalions with minimal effort was unsettling. A new voice, deep and resonant, broke the tense silence. And yet you continued. The voice belonged to Lord Kethrin, an elder of the Dominion, his many eyes glimmering with something between intrigue and dread. He gestured to the holographic projections surrounding them, real-time footage from the front lines. Cities turned into death traps. Dominion soldiers who had simply vanished without a trace. The shattered hulls of warships that should have been impervious to conventional weaponry. Captured Dominion officers who had been released, only to refuse to speak of what had been done to them. Zelvar felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Yes, he said. We continued. And now they have stopped pretending to be civilized. A stillness spread through the chamber, thick and suffocating. One of the younger lords, a reptilian strategist named Velos, curled his talons against the stone. What does that mean? Surely they are merely. No, Zelvar cut in, his voice firm. We assumed they had shown us their worst. We were wrong. He activated a new projection, a Dominion battleship, the Veil of Conquest, floating aimlessly in space, its lights flickering, its engines dead. No weapons fire had been recorded. No distress calls had been received. The ship had simply stopped. A boarding team had been sent in. They never returned. When a second team entered, what they found inside was worse than slaughter. The crew was alive, but unresponsive, staring, their expressions hollow, their bodies trembling as if trapped in the deepest throes of terror. Scans showed no signs of physical injury, no neural tampering, no traces of chemical influence. Something had broken them. Then, in the command center, carved into the steel walls, they found a message. This is the price of persistence. Silence. Velos swallowed, his tail coiling tightly around his chair. They do not fight like any race we have known. No, Zelvar agreed. They fight like a species that has spent its entire existence mastering war. Not for conquest, not for survival, but for the art of it. Asterisk, asterisk. The Dominion was not prepared for this. Their wars had always been ones of overwhelming power, of domination through superior numbers, technology, and strategy. But the humans did not break. They did not fight for territory or survival alone. They fought with something deeper, something older than any Dominion species could comprehend. They fought with purpose. Grand Imperator Vorsk exhaled slowly, his mandibles twitching in thought. You believed they were holding back? Zelvar nodded. I no longer believe. I know. More footage played across the chamber. Human strike teams infiltrating Dominion bases, not merely destroying them, but erasing them. Dominion encryption was rendered useless. Supply chains were disrupted before they could even be established. Entire fleets vanished into the void, with no wreckage to mark their end. And worst of all, there were no human casualties recorded. They are waiting, Zelvar said, voice grim. They are measuring us, calculating, deciding if we are worth keeping alive. The weight of his words pressed against the chamber like an approaching storm. Then, as if the universe itself had chosen to punctuate the moment, a Dominion communication officer sprinted into the chamber, his bioluminescent skin pulsing in rapid, frantic patterns. His breath came in short, panic bursts. We have just received a new transmission. Vorsk turned, his voice sharp. From our forces? The officer swallowed. No, from them. A hush fell. The chamber dimmed as a single projection filled the air, a human standing alone. His posture relaxed, yet unmistakably commanding. It was the same man who had spoken before, General Adrian Carter. His face was unreadable, his voice measured. But behind the calm, there was something terrible lurking beneath. This is your final opportunity. His words were slow, deliberate. You are an empire that has known only dominance. You have never encountered an enemy willing to meet you without fear. He tilted his head slightly, as if regarding the Dominion leadership like insects beneath his boot. Now you have. A pause. Then his expression shifted. For the first time, a hint of something new crept into his voice. Not a threat, not a boast. Amusement. You have mistaken our patience for weakness. You have mistaken our restraint for limitation. He leaned forward, his eyes dark pools of certainty. And you have mistaken civilization for kindness. The chamber felt cold. Carter's voice dropped to a near whisper. You wanted to see what we were without our masks. Very well. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in its long and terrible history, the Galactic Dominion stood on the precipice of something it had never known. Doubt. The first Dominion world fell in silence. There was no declaration of war, no grand battle, no warning beyond the one they had already received. One moment, the industrial colony of Varnal 6 was a thriving Dominion outpost, its defenses active, its fleets patrolling the system. The next, it was gone. Not destroyed. Not bombarded into rubble. Simply erased. The planetary command center remained intact, but its streets were empty. Buildings stood untouched, but their occupants had vanished. There was no sign of struggle, no signs of resistance or retreat. No wreckage. No bodies. Only absence. Zelvar watched the footage from his command console, his 4 hands clenched into trembling fists. He had overseen the conquest of a dozen star systems. He had shattered empires, burned civilizations to cinders. But this was something else entirely. Where are the bodies? Grand Imperator Vorsk's voice crackled through the transmission, his tone uncharacteristically unsteady. Zelvar didn't answer. He didn't know. The Dominion had sent scout teams to investigate, but none had returned. Every transmission ended the same way, ***, a brief burst of static, followed by silence, ***, no distress calls, no combat logs, just silence. Then came the first survivor, a single transport ship drifting near the Varnal 6 system, its emergency beacon flickering weakly. It had no crew, at least none that were still whole. Zelvar watched the medical officers inspect the lone occupant, ***, a Dominion soldier, curled into a fetal position, his once proud armor cracked and covered in deep, self-inflicted gouges. ***, his eyes were open, but he saw nothing. His mandibles twitched, moving as if whispering some silent plea. And then he screamed. A high-pitched, raw, endless wail that sent a chill through every officer in the chamber. Not in pain, not in anger, but in the purest form of terror imaginable. ***. He clawed at his own face, his exoskeleton cracking beneath his own strength. Medical teams restrained him, but it took 6 soldiers to hold him down. Even then, he never stopped screaming. Only one phrase escaped between the howls. One phrase, repeated over and over in a trembling, broken voice. They are awake. Zelvar turned away from the display, bow rising in his throat. It was impossible. No force could do this. No species could erase an entire planet without a trace. No empire, no matter how powerful, could instill this kind of horror without firing a single shot. And yet, the truth was undeniable. The humans had warned them. Now, they were demonstrating why that warning should have been heeded. Across the chamber, another officer, a young strategist named Velos, spoke hesitantly. "We need to negotiate." The room turned sharply toward him. It was an unthinkable suggestion. The Dominion did not negotiate. The Dominion took, ***. But Zelvar said nothing, because deep down he agreed. The war had shifted. The humans were no longer reacting. They were hunting. More worlds fell, not through battle, but through the same creeping horror that had consumed Varnal 6. Entire fleets went dark. Fortress planets, once believed impenetrable, became hollow husks overnight. And each time the Dominion tried to respond, they found themselves one step behind, their plans anticipated, their strategies countered before they were even executed. Then came the next message. This time, it was not broadcast across Dominion space. It was delivered directly. Zelvar stood in his private chambers aboard the Eternal Supremacy, watching the transmission unfold before him. A single figure sat in a dimly lit room, his uniform pristine, his expression unreadable. General Adrian Carter. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "We were patient," Carter said. "We were kind." He tilted his head slightly, considering his next words. "That was a mistake." Zelvar's breath hitched. "You believed our civilization was a leash, a weakness. You thought we were restrained by our morality, our politics, our need for diplomacy." Carter leaned forward slightly, his eyes piercing through the transmission, as if he could see directly into Zelvar's soul. "You thought wrong." The screen flickered, showing brief, fragmented glimpses, Dominion soldiers bound and shaking, entire fleets drifting lifelessly, a Dominion warlord, once feared, now curled in a corner, whispering to himself in broken syllables. "We could have ended this quickly," Carter continued, "but that would not have taught you anything." The screen cut back to his face. "We needed you to understand." Silence. Then Carter smiled. Not cruel, not boastful, but knowing, ***. You have taken from the weak for centuries. You have conquered, crushed, consumed. And in all that time, you never once wondered, he paused, then spoke the words that shattered Zelvar's last illusions of control. What happens when the prey bites back? The transmission ended. Zelvar stood motionless, his body locked in place by the sheer weight of what he had just witnessed. He had led campaigns against countless species. He had seen bravery, desperation, defiance. But this was something else entirely. This was a lesson, and they were learning it far too late. The Dominion's surrender was unthinkable, and yet it had become inevitable. Zelvar stood on the bridge of the eternal supremacy, his once proud shoulders now heavy with something unfamiliar. Resignation, ***. Around him, his officers moved in silence, their usual rigid discipline replaced by the quiet, mechanical movements of soldiers who had finally grasped the weight of their defeat. The transmission had been sent. The final plea. For the first time in Dominion history, they had asked for terms. And for the first time, they had not received an immediate response. That, more than anything, filled Zelvar with dread. He had expected threats, demands, conditions that would strip the Dominion of its power. But the silence that followed their surrender request was something worse. It was consideration. It meant the humans were deciding whether or not they accepted the surrender, whether or not they allowed the Dominion to exist at all. The thought sent a cold shudder through him. Grand Imperator Vorsk sat across from him in the War Council chamber, his mandibles clicking in quiet unease. His hands, which once moved with the confidence of an empire builder, now trembled with the uncertainty of a man who had never once doubted his own survival. "What do we do if they say no?" Vorsk asked, his voice uncharacteristically hushed. Zelvar had no answer. Every Dominion species had a word for defeat, but none had ever needed a word for annihilation. Before he could respond, the ship's comms officer turned sharply. Incoming transmission. Silence gripped the chamber. Origin. Zelvar managed. The officer swallowed. Earth. No one spoke. The chamber's air grew heavy as the display flickered to life. General Adrian Carter appeared, standing alone in a darkened room. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but Zelvar had learned enough about humans to know that meant nothing. For a long moment, Carter simply watched them, not with the gloating arrogance of a conqueror, not with the cold indifference of a victor, but with something far worse. Deliberation. Finally, he spoke. "You ask for surrender." His voice was unreadable. "And yet, I wonder, do you even understand what that means?" Zelvar forced himself to hold the human's gaze. "It means the Dominion acknowledges its defeat. It means we accept." "It means," Carter interrupted smoothly, "that we decide whether you are worth sparing." Vorsk exhaled sharply, but he said nothing. There was nothing to say. Carter continued. "You came to our world believing yourselves superior. You saw our diplomacy as weakness, our restraint as limitation. And now, when you have finally begun to understand what you have unleashed, you ask us to accept your surrender." A pause. "Give me one reason why we should." The question cut deeper than any blade. Zelvar had fought endless campaigns, negotiated peace treaties only to break them, crushed civilizations beneath the Dominion's might. He had faced species who had begged for mercy, who had fought to the last breath, who had thrown themselves at his feet in desperate hope. But never, not once, had he been the one forced to justify his own survival. He opened his mandibles, then closed them. He had no answer. Carter studied them for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, he exhaled. "You are fortunate," he said at last. "Your extinction would be efficient. It would be justified. It would be easy." The Dominion's leadership remained frozen, waiting for the words that would seal their fate. "But," Carter continued, his voice quiet now, measured, "humans are a strange species. We do not kill for sport. We do not conquer for the sake of pride. And we do not destroy simply because we can." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. "But we do remember. A slow, terrible smile touched his lips. And we know how to make others remember, too. Zelvar's chest tightened. The humans would not annihilate them. They would do something worse. They would make sure that for every generation to come, the Dominion would remember this moment. They would ensure that the pain, the terror, the helplessness that had gripped them now would never be forgotten. A fate worse than extinction. Carter leaned forward slightly, his eyes dark and unrelenting. "Your empire's over," he said simply. "You will withdraw from every occupied world. You will dismantle your fleets. You will surrender your weapons, your research, your colonies. And for as long as your species exists, you will carry the weight of what you tried to do." He let the words sink in, then added, almost as an afterthought, "If you ever forget, if you ever attempt to rise again, we will remind you." The transmission ended. No one spoke. Zelvar's body felt weightless, as if he had been untethered from everything he had ever known. The Dominion was over. Not with fire, not with death, but with fear. For the first time in history, the predators of the galaxy had learned what it meant to be hunted.